I'm blaming the system. There's too many players who are being asked to do roles that they're not accustomed to.
Is it all about the system? Is that a legitimate complaint? Is there more to it than that? There's got to be, hasn't there?
Who's to blame? The players, the manager. Sir Jim Ratcliffe's been an absolute disaster of an owner as far as I'm concerned. He's got just about every big decision wrong.
It's okay for you to sit there and say, oh, I don't like this decision. That was wrong. We should get rid of these players. And then when he does it, complain about the way that he does it.
Don't make bad decisions along the way. Tell me what he's done right, Sir Jim Ratcliffe.
But if you keep chopping and changing manager, chopping and changing system, not getting better people through the door to play football in that football team, you are never, ever going to return to the top table.
It's the worst start since 1992. That's not nitpicking.
The problems at Manchester United are not exclusive to the 11 players that are on the field and the manager in the dugout. You know that. So it's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface. England's former left-back Micky Gray is here, and so is Alex Crook. Have you had a good weekend? You two spent a lot of time together this weekend. Are you, Micky, are you in need of a bit of a break from the Crookmeister?
We had about a 6-hour loving yesterday, me and Crookie, but that loving kind of it drifted after about 15 seconds yesterday. But I mean, we're obviously at the City United derby yesterday, and I think optimism was the word we used as we walked into the stadium. But after 5-10 minutes, I think you just kind of knew what was coming. It was just awful.
We'll get to that in more detail a little bit later on. In fact, that'll be our first thing on the agenda this weekend as we look back on the Premier League action. Crookmeister, apart from what happened in Manchester, have you had a good week? Because we didn't see you on Thursday. We kind of sort of didn't notice you weren't there, but we didn't see you later in the week. What have you been up to?
Yeah, I had a good couple of days away golfing with a few of the ex-Portsmouth players. Obviously, they were all pumped up for the South Coast derby that you were at. I was at Bournemouth on Saturday. Continue to be blown away, really, by what Andoni Iraola is doing there, having sold pretty much his whole defensive line. And yeah, unfortunately, I was at the Manchester derby on Sunday. Strange atmosphere, really. And we're obviously going to talk a lot about the football, but let's pay tribute to both sets of supporters for the way they celebrated the life of Ricky Hatton before the game.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm not going to pretend that I was Ricky Hatton's best mate or I knew him particularly well, but I did work for a series on Dancing on Ice with him, and he was a regular at the hotel that we stayed at there, and he was just unbelievable company. He was a brilliant storyteller. He would sit there, and do you know what? We had a couple of nights where, I mean, people pay a lot of money to go and see Ricky talk and do like an evening with. And we were privileged enough to regularly be sitting in a bar till very late at night and listening to him regale stories of things that had happened in his boxing career and people that he'd met and stuff that he'd seen and done. And he always did it in this fantastic way where it all tied together and he could come up with a little bit of humour towards the end. And I must admit, it was half time in the Portsmouth Southampton game down at St Mary's when I got the message, and I was absolutely gutted, to be honest with you, because he was a pleasure to be in his company. It was a pleasure to be in his company, and I have to say to his family and his friends that I express my deepest condolences, because I think the world of sport has lost an unbelievable ambassador. Boxing's lost an unbelievable ambassador, but the world has lost a very charismatic human being. Okay, let's talk about the football and let's see what happened, because if they needed to, they did. They delivered a tribute to Ricky yesterday with Manchester City producing a really good display. Let's dig into it with Micky Gray and Alex Crook. Well, for years, the Manchester derby was a little bit like a parent playing FIFA against their kid. United holding the controller, City just sort of watching. But yesterday, it looked like United had their controller unplugged. What have Ruben Amorim, Alfred Albert and Scott Duncan all got in common? Crook?
I don't know, but go on, you tell me.
They are all Manchester United managers that have taken charge of over 20 games in the top flight and have a lower win ratio than 27%. Look, Manchester City came into this game having lost to Spurs and Brighton. Did they massively recalibrate over the course of the international break, Mickey Gray? Or did Manchester United just make them look very good by putting them under zero pressure?
I think there's no doubt that Man City are going to have bigger tests this season. What wound me up was it being a derby game and just the performance. I think there was spells where you could see what United wanted to do, maybe 10 or 15 minutes in the first half, and you maybe had a spell of about 5 minutes in the second half. But other than that, when you consider how much money they went out and spent in the summer, I know Cunha wasn't playing and Sesko was playing his first game, but I just didn't see any difference in from what I saw last season in Man United's performance. And there's been spells this season where it looked like there was going to be improvement, but I think that probably has to go down, barring the Liverpool game, as maybe your biggest game of the season. And to put on a performance like that, I thought was really shabby. I really did. And it looked like the players again had switched off. I'm not quite sure still if they're enjoying playing this system. But Manchester City, full credit. I mean, they approached the game in the right way. Obviously, you've just touched on the bad news at the beginning of the game. But they were professional and they went out and they put on a performance and they knew exactly what they needed to do. They knew how to break Manchester United down. As I said before, I think they'll have bigger tests than what they had against Man United. But from the two sides, there's only one that's going to be challenging for those European spots come the end of the season. And I think it's going to be another dreary season for Man United.
Well, I think Manchester City did well. I thought Haaland answered any of the critics about his abilities, and there was a little bit of a discussion, wasn't there, in the build-up to the game? Who's the best striker in the world? As if you can sort of just sort of binary decide who it is on a week-to-week basis. Obviously, he's got the history so far in the Premier League, and 50 goals in 50 Premier League appearances at home is testament to that. Foden, I thought, had a good first half. I like Oscar Bob. I think he's very cute on the ball. O'Reilly looks so comfortable at left back into midfield yesterday. They weren't perfect. I think Rodri was still a little bit loose in possession. Kusanov is far too eager and he will cause you problems over the course of the season. But United didn't have the wherewithal to put them under pressure, to punish them. Where are City, though, Alex? Let's focus on them first before we move into Manchester United. I suppose we'll find out a little bit more about them when we see them against Arsenal next week.
100%. You know, that's going to be a much different game. I think it's hard to gauge too much from City's performance. Were they back to their best, or were Manchester United just really easy to play against? I think we can say that Erling Haaland is back on top form with a number of goals that he scored for club and country this season. He was back to bullying defenders. He certainly did that with Luke Shaw for the second goal and with the way that he ran from pretty much inside his own half for his second and City's third. I think Phil Foden produced a really mature performance. He was an excellent header. But I've been looking at the stats, and we're going to talk a lot about United's system, and particularly in midfield. Phil Foden actually spent a lot of the game when City didn't have the ball, dropping in to help Rodri, because I think it's pretty clear that he's still not fully fit. He got through twice as many defensive contributions as Bruno Fernandes, and it was Fernandes who was supposed to be playing in a deeper role. So credit to him. And I spoke to Foden afterwards, and I asked the question, are you extra motivated now because you've been left out by England? And he said, yeah, it's a big driving factor for me. I love to play for my country and I want to be at the World Cup. So I think that could be good news as far as City are concerned. But as you say, we'll learn more about exactly where they're at Arsenal next week. I still make them third favourites behind Liverpool and Arsenal for the title. But we could do a whole podcast on Manchester United's failings. All of that early season positivity, I think, was swept away in that derby yesterday.
Okay, well, and Burmo for me was the best of the United bunch. But looking around that team, I think it just still lacks a huge amount of quality. And it does look rudderless, doesn't it? Who are you blaming now then, Crook?
I'm blaming the system, as I did when we had that heated debate with you and Troy on the back of the Grimsby debacle. There's too many players who are being asked to do roles that they're not accustomed to. Bruno Fernandes is the obvious one, and I can't believe that Ruben Amorim is still experimenting with that after what happened in the Europa League final in Bilbao. Amad Diallo looks like a little boy lost to me. He doesn't know if he's a right winger, a left winger, a right wing back, a left wing back. He played in the number 10 position yesterday and was unable to influence proceedings. I think part of the reason Luke Shaw gave up when Haaland went past him and bullied him is because he's not a centre-back. He's being asked to play a role that he is also not accustomed to. I know he's done it for England at times, but it's not his preferred position. Šeško is going to get a lot of flack because at the moment he doesn't look like a £70 million striker. He didn't touch the ball once inside the Manchester City penalty area over the course of the 90-odd minutes. Is that his fault, or is that because the system doesn't serve his strikers? Rasmus Højlund has scored within 15 minutes of his debut for Napoli at the weekend. That's not gone unnoticed. This system does not work in the Premier League. You talk about lack of quality. The only reason Patrick Dorgu was signed, the only reason he's in the team, is because he's the only player that United have got that can really play as a left wing back. He is rubbish. He's just not good enough.
That might be a little bit harsh. Let's ask a left wing back, exactly what the problems are with Dorgu and that system. Look, I think Ruben Amorim has been asked about the system more than he's been asked about anything else since he came in. Is this just a media fixation with the way that they set up and the fact that he is quite dogmatic about the 3-4-3 formation? Or is it a legitimate criticism? Does it change the way you operate as players? Because the system doesn't dictate that you don't get booked. The system doesn't dictate that you don't go in for tackles. The system doesn't dictate that Phil Foden does more defensive actions than Bruno Fernandes. The system doesn't dictate that Patrick Dorgu gets into a crossing position and then cannot deliver the final ball. So is it all about the system? Is that a legitimate complaint? Is there more to it than that? There's got to be, hasn't there?
Well, Sam, look, I'm along with everybody else, and I agree with Crookie and yourself. I don't think this system's going to work at Manchester United, but it's not just down to a system. It is down to personnel, and the personnel that are playing in certain positions, they're just not good enough. You bring in Patrick Dorgu. I've seen enough of him now to know that he's not going to be good enough to play for Manchester United. As a wing back, your job is obviously first and foremost to defend, but then as a wing back, you have to get in the opposition's half. You have to create chances for your forward players, i.e. Šeško and Mbumo, Cunha if he's playing, Xerxes, whoever it might be. He's crossing over the first 3 or 4 games. I know he got left out of the game before Manchester City. It's been awful. His end product is awful. Mazraoui was brought back into the starting 11 against Manchester City. His quality in the final third wasn't good enough. And as a defence, in your mind, the first and foremost is let's keep clean sheets. Well, they've not been able to keep clean sheets. They've not been able to keep clean sheets for a long time. Bruno Fernandes, how many times have midfield players drifted off him since he's been playing in this new position and scored goals inside of the 18-yard box? Because Bruno Fernandes, his first thought is an offensive midfield player and create opportunities for his teammates, which he has done, but he didn't do it against Manchester City. So, yeah, it's square pegs in round holes. And that is the problem that Manchester United have got. And I think the old adage is just work hard. And the players are clearly not working hard enough. Yes, they do for 45 minutes, but in the second half, you can see players are switching off, drifting into their own minds and playing their own game instead of playing a structured game of football that is going to get you results. Playing for a club like Manchester United, where the expectancy is to go and win football matches every single week. There's so much wrong. I said in commentary against Man City that they needed to go out and spend another £230 million to get things right at Man United. They had issues in the summer, which was goalkeeping problem, a holder midfield player, and probably a striker to come in and maybe get the goals for Manchester United. One of those positions got addressed with a kind of a type of person who you'd maybe expect to come in at Manchester United for the price of £74.5 million. No holder midfield player, and a young goalkeeper that got brought in with hours to spare after the transfer window was closed. Those issues are still going to be there in January. Whether they're able to adapt and change that, I'm not quite sure, because I don't think they're going to be in a position to change things.
And this is the key thing, isn't it? Right? This is a Manchester United squad that is going for a major change. It's a Manchester United corporation that's going for a major transitional period. It's going to take a long time to sort it out. And you have to have a degree of patience. Gary Neville said yesterday, I can't get angry anymore because this is a nothing performance. But he almost had to accept that this is an interim Manchester United. You can't turn it round in one transfer window. You can't turn it round in 2 transfer windows. you probably can't turn it round in 3 transfer windows. Such has been the neglect and the poor recruitment over the course of a period of now nearly 13 years, maybe going back even longer than that. So when you're in that situation, do you have to accept, Crook, that you are going to have to ride out a period of, I suppose, transition's the wrong word. No, it is transition, but almost reassessing your expectations of what you're going to get from Manchester United?
I don't know, to be honest. Yeah, when Ineos came in, United was 6th in the Premier League. They went on to win the FA Cup that season, you'll remember. They're miles away from being 6th in the Premier League and winning any trophies. So who's to blame? The players, the manager. Sir Jim Ratcliffe's been an absolute disaster of an owner as far as I'm concerned. He's got just about every big decision wrong, and the images of him shaking his head at the end of the game yesterday stuck in the throat a little bit, to be honest. But then, I've already mentioned, I was at Bournemouth on Saturday. They are brilliant. You know, they've got good recruitment, they've got a good manager, they've got players who put a shift in for the shirt. Are Manchester United fans to expect teams like Bournemouth to be better than them? No. There's still certain standards. They spent over £200 million on players in this summer transfer window. So was I expecting a worse start to the season since 1992? Absolutely not. I was predicting United might finish 5th this season. When you look at Newcastle's issues with Isak, you look at Aston Villa and the problems they've had with recruitment. So I take your point, but I don't think you can just accept that after 10 months in charge, it's getting worse, not better.
I don't think you have to accept it, but I think you have to understand it, right? You just cited someone who have been the subject of a lot of investment and a long-term project with owners, technical directors, and players that are aligned, right? So you've got Bournemouth is a long-term project. Let's not pretend that it isn't. It has been. It's been built from the ground up by a very good manager over a number of years, handed over to somebody else and handed over to somebody else. You'll mention Brighton in the same breath. Again, it's a long-term project. Some of those decisions that Tony Bloom made didn't work, so he changed them and he made
Everton are 6th.
different movements in directions. They are. But that's because at the moment, are they set up for long-term success? Do you think that over the course of the next few years that they are going to go on and be dominant in the Premier League? It's a different project. Everton is a different project to Manchester United. Manchester United are looking to strip it back, rebuild and start again. And that takes time. You know, you were banging on about the Glazers for years and years and years and years, and you wanted a different owner. You've got a different owner now. If I'd have said
You've
to
got
you,
a Glazer in disguise.
Wait, hold on. If I'd said to you when you were asking for a new person to come in and run this football club, you would have said, I want that man or woman to be a local person with a Manchester United interest, who cared about the club, who was supremely rich and was able to invest in the future of it, right? Now, I don't know how many supremely rich billionaires there are that are Manchester United fans from the local area, but I reckon there's probably single digits across the world. You've got one. He is in charge. Is he going to be the nicest, cuddliest person to make every decision correctly in the way that you want him to do it? Probably not. He's a billionaire. He didn't become a billionaire by being the nicest bloke in the room. But ultimately, you've got to give him the chance to do it. It's okay for you to sit there and say, oh, I don't like this decision. That was wrong. We should get rid of these players. Oh, why has he got rid of all these players? He should make sure this bloated organisation is trimmed back and it's more streamlined. And then when he does it, complain about the way that he does it. But for him and his group of people, he has to be super focused. He has to think about the long term, and they have to be allowed to get on with it. It isn't going to happen overnight. There's no way it's going to happen overnight. It's a long-term project. It's a long road back. And unfortunately, you are just going to have to wait, because if you keep chopping and changing, it's only going to get worse.
That's a brilliant speech, but you tell me one thing that Sir Jim Ratcliffe has got right since he got here. Are you in a position to argue that the decisions he's made have set the club backwards? The Eric Ten Hag debacle, the Dan Ashworth debacle, even hiring...
You wanted Eric Ten Hag gone.
Even hiring... He wanted him gone. They gave him a new contract.
No, you wanted him gone.
The job.
You wanted him gone. You wanted him gone. Now you're saying that you want him back, or that it was the wrong decision.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying the way they went about it was a complete farce. They were basically having a beauty parade of various managers, and then because nobody actually wanted the job at that time, They kept Erik ten Hag, gave him a new contract, gave him more money to spend in that transfer window, and then sacked him a few months into the season. They spent months trying to get Dan Ashworth and a lot of money getting Dan Ashworth. They got rid of him within months. And actually, I think that was a massively bad decision. I think if you want someone to come in and change the culture, that is Dan Ashworth. The mistake they made was they thought they were getting a recruitment expert, which Dan Ashworth isn't. Again, didn't do their research properly. Then they hire Ruben Amorim, who I know for a fact was on Liverpool's list of potential targets before they went for Arne Slot. The reason they didn't hire him is because he's so wedded to this system. They didn't think it would work in the Premier League. They didn't think the Manchester United, the Liverpool squad was set up to play that system. Nor did Dan Ashworth. So they've hired a manager who doesn't suit the players. So tell me what he's done right, Sir Jim Ratcliffe. Give me one.
I tell you, actually, I tell you what I think he has done right.
Training ground looks all right.
I tell you what I think he's done right. He's sorted out the training ground. He's streamlined the business behind the scenes. I don't think he's done it in the right manner. And I think we can all argue. Look, I've got friends that work at Manchester United and things have changed there. And it's not a great place to be at the moment. But we all sat here and said this football club needs a major change. And now it's had a major change. We're all moaning about how they go about it.
Don't cock
and
it
I can
up
understand that.
Don't make bad
decisions. You can make mistakes. You make mistakes. Dan Ashworth was a mistake. They got the wrong person in to do the wrong job. And they decided, rather than allow that to go on forever and ever and ever and cause problems behind the scenes and friction between the senior management team, they decided to be decisive and make a decision quickly. Other clubs, and you've mentioned Bournemouth, we've talked about Brighton in the past. They've changed sporting directors in the not too distant past. They've gone through managers. They made mistakes with managers over the course of their tenure. Tony Bloom and his group. Look at Sami Hyypiä. Once they made that mistake,
one manager.
But once they made that mistake, they then decided, right, okay, we have to do this differently now. And they learned from that. And that's what this group is going to have to do. They're not perfect. There's no way that every decision they make and have made is right. But if we sit here for the next 10 years nitpicking and telling them to change everything every 5 minutes, then we're going to find ourselves in a situation where Manchester United 10 years down the line are in the same position as when Ratcliffe and Clough walked through the door. He might not be everyone's cup of tea. I totally get that. He might not have made the best decisions so far. But if you keep chopping and changing manager, chopping and changing system, not getting better people through the door to play football in that football team, you are never, ever going to return to the top table. Ever. There's got to be patient.
Sam Crookie, don't you think that people's opinions of Jim Ratcliffe and everybody behind the scenes would have been different if they were winning football matches?
Of course.
Then he would have been able to go on doing his business of losing people who've been working at the football club for many, many years. I think you just touched the training ground there, Sam. I actually did the tour when they opened the new training ground, 50 million quid. Inside, yes, it looks a lot different to what it was, but I don't know, do the players actually deserve to be training in a training ground like that at the moment? I'm not quite sure about that. I look at some of the players. Is this down to the manager, or is this down to the coaching staff, the technical directors? Is it down to Sir Jim Ratcliffe, because he's the one who's obviously signing the checks away? Of the players that are actually coming in at Manchester United, barring Cunha, barring Mbeumo, who've probably been the two hits at Manchester United, can you actually pinpoint one individual player that has improved since they've walked through the door at Manchester United under the tenure of, you can maybe even say even Erik ten Hag, but Ruben Amorim? Because I'm not seeing these improvements. And I quietly said to Crookie, I think it was the other day, secretly, if you had a word with every individual player at Manchester United and said, do you like playing this system? And I know I'm going back to the system. I know I'm kind of going back a little bit here, but if you ask those individual players, do you like playing this system? I don't think you get one person putting their hand up and saying, yes, I do.
And you talk about players going forwards. Who were United's two best players last season? Bruno Fernandes and Amad Diallo. Who are the two biggest victims of this system? Bruno Fernandes and Amad Diallo. What manager worth their salt comes into a team, looks at the two best players and where they're playing and thinks, you know what? Because I want to play this system, I'm going to take you out of the position where you've been thriving. I'm going to ask you to do stuff that is alien to you. It doesn't make any sense. And you say nitpicking. It's the worst start since 1992. That's not nitpicking. Ruben Amorim
I totally agree with that.
Fewer points than any other manager who's been ever present in the Premier League during his tenure. It's a shocking record. And the one thing I was interested in, maybe Mickey's got a view on this as well. One of the quotes he gave to the written journalist, because everybody was pressing him on the system. Gary Neville raised it on Sky about Fernandes. I obviously raised it. The written journalist raised it. We can't all be wrong. Amorim said in that press conference, there are a lot of things that you have no idea what happened during these months. What does he mean by that? Is that a pop at the hierarchy? At the players?
But this is what I'm saying, is that it's all right for you and I and everyone to sit there and go, oh, it's the system, it's this, it's that, it's that. The problems at Manchester United are not exclusive to the 11 players that are on the field and the manager in the dugout. The problems at Manchester United are all over the place and have been for ages. You know that because you've been involved with people that have been at that club for such a long time that they can tell you what it's like to work there, what it's like behind the scenes, what the negotiations are like, what the situation is like when you're trying to do a deal or get this or get that through the gate. It's hard work. And that is why there has to be a degree of reality check here that this is not going to turn around overnight. But look, I think you've got some valid points on the team selection. And certainly we're all, I think, sitting there going, they need to put more energy in, they need to be more fight, there needs to be more about them. But I just don't see it changing anytime soon. And I think it's a really easy thing to say, they should have done this, they should have done this, they should have done this, they should have done this. Manchester United are operating in the glare of the world. Brighton, Bournemouth, Brentford, all the other clubs are operating far away from the spotlight. So they can make their mistakes. They can do things that are wrong. Everything that Manchester United do is jumped upon. We've done 20 minutes on this podcast talking about nothing other. And that's because it's the biggest story in town. Every time they do anything, it is. Look, as far as the game's concerned, I think we should say Manchester City did really well. I wanted to mention that they've got Napoli on Thursday night and the return of Kevin De Bruyne to the Etihad Stadium. Napoli are the top team in Italy right now. De Bruyne scored at the weekend, and so did Rasmus Højlund, the one that got away. I'm going to say nothing more on that. Let's move on to the other contenders for the title. Liverpool and Arsenal also in action this weekend. Burnley 0, Liverpool 1. Some teams let in late goals and some teams score late goals. Liverpool appear to live in injury time rent-free. Did you know that Liverpool have now scored 47 winning goals in the Premier League era in the 90th minute or later? 13 more than any other side. Arsenal second with 34. Mohamed Salah getting his 188th goal in the competition. It was actually his first winner after 90 minutes, but it was a significant one. Can't be easy being Arne Slot, though, can it, Micky Gray? It's got to affect his pulse rate, his blood pressure. You can, of course, view this the other way, in that eventually their luck will run out in the end. They can't keep beating teams in the last few minutes of the game, surely.
Well, can they not? When you look at their forward line and Isak to come into the starting 11 as well, I mean, they're just going to get better, Liverpool. I have to say, I don't think they've started the season very well, Liverpool. Sounds bonkers and bizarre because they've got maximum points, but they didn't quite have that clinical edge yesterday. They had 56 touches in Burnley's opposition box yesterday, and they had to wait until, the 90-odd minute to get the ball in the back of the net from the penalty spot. And that was just through some stupidity from Hannibal as that ball comes into the area. They just haven't given us that polished performance that I think maybe everybody was expecting. But are we quick to jump the gun here a little bit because they've made new signings? New signings are still bedding into the way that Arne Slot wants Liverpool to play. But they will be there come the end of the season, Liverpool. I mean, I think everybody's got them as title favourites. I've been quite impressed with the organisation and how well Arsenal have started the season, but Liverpool are not going to lose too many games this season.
No, Isak, training but nowhere near ready was the sort of quote that we came over yesterday. His pre-season starts now, says Slot. How long before we see him at his best? And when he is at his best, Crook, what does he do to this Liverpool team? As Mickey says, they're favourites, everyone's favourites for the title. And I suppose when you're not playing particularly well and you're still winning games the way they are, it only enhances the fact that people think that you're the best team in the land.
Yeah, I mean, this guy actually goes back to last season. You remember we had a couple of debates throughout the course of the season. I didn't think they were brilliant last year, Liverpool. I thought they were efficient and they were better than everybody else. This season, they've just about been better than their opponents, but they seem to be scraping through every week. I do expect it to tick at some stage. Obviously, they've made changes in personnel. They play a different way now. I do think they're missing the creativity of Trent Alexander-Arnold, and maybe that's gone a little bit unspoken. But also the form of Mohamed Salah is a concern, isn't it? He scored, obviously, a brilliant penalty. He made no impact in the game until he stepped up and hit that penalty. And his form since the back end of last season is a concern. So I guess what the arrival of Alexander Isak will do is give them a different talisman, because at the moment their talisman is not firing.
Indeed, they've got Champions League action in midweek as well. The other title contenders, Arsenal and Chelsea now. Let's start at Brentford, because Chelsea dropped points yet again. Did Enzo Maresca take a little bit of a liberty with the lineup here, with one eye on their Champions League game, Micky Gray, against Bayern Munich?
Well, I think there's certain managers that the managers we're talking about at the top of the Premier League table who we expect to be there at the end of the season. And one of them being Pep Guardiola. I'll quickly touch on Pep because I know we've done Man City. But I think he prioritises the team that's in front of him. And he puts out his best team to win that game. I'm not sure Enzo Maresca does that. And I think at times Mikel Arteta's done exactly the same thing. I think he's took a risk thinking that Brentford was going to be an easier game than he probably envisaged. But they got a shock, because I thought Brentford's second half certainly deserved something out of the game, and they just kept asking questions, and they eventually got something out of the game. I mean, Caicedo's finish is absolutely fantastic, and they brought on Garnacho, certain individuals who've just came to the club, so maybe he was trying to bed them in. But I think with Champions League football this time around, they're going to have to try and play their best pack every single week. You can do it in the Conference League and the Europa League. It can maybe rotate a little bit more than maybe you would do if you're playing Champions League football. But I think that's going to be the big acid test for Chelsea this season, is how they kind of shuffle from Premier League football, expected to be title chasers, if you like. I'm not quite sure they're good enough to go all the way to win the Premier League this season, but then also shuffle the pack for Champions League football in midweek. I know their squad is bigger than anybody else's, but I still think when you look at Chelsea, they're probably still searching for their best 11 in the Premier League and in Champions League football.
Not necessarily sure it is bigger than everybody else's, actually, to be honest with you. I know that's sort of like the common conception, but perception, but it might be a misconception, really, because if you look at Nottingham Forest, they've got a huge amount of players. There's other teams that have got a lot more experience than Chelsea. There's a lot of young players in there, but they did have no Esteval because of illness, no Delap because of injury, no Palmer from the start because he was still recovering from that knock that he suffered in the West Ham warm-up. But I wanted to ask you about Tosin Adarabioyo and his defending of the opener from Kevin Sade. I was watching the game and I was shouting and screaming at the screen, "Show him outside! Show him outside!" I mean, is that just bad defending? Is that bad decision making? Is that a centre half maybe pulled out into a wide area and a fullback would be better at doing that? Explain to me why he doesn't show him on the outside.
Well, he got isolated first and foremost, Sam. I don't think he was expecting the long ball through from Jordan Henderson to come through. And I think as a centre half, you're always looking alongside you for your teammate to say, right, I need a little bit of help here. But because he was caught vulnerable and he was on the back foot straight away, not expecting that pass, I think he got himself into a situation where he was thinking, as a centre half, I just need to try and win this ball. But he got himself muddled up a little bit. And you're right, he should have showed him on the outside. But we see that with wingers now, because we'll see left-footed players playing on the right-hand side. We see right-footed players playing on the left-hand side and cutting in and trying to get onto their stronger foot. And I think on that situation, yeah, it's a split-second thought as a centre-half. What do I do here? He was maybe looking for his teammate to try and pull him out of a little bit of a mess he found himself in. But it was too late then. As I said, it's all down to split seconds. Look, he got a little bit of a touch on it, but it was a stretched out leg. The little slight deflection just popped the ball into the bottom of the corner. But as a centre-half, if you're last man, even if you're a fullback and you're the last man in defence, your thought process is, as a defender, how can I slow him down? How can I slow him down and let my teammates get back alongside me? And then he's got a difficult angle to try and get his shot away. But that split second had gone by the time he chopped it onto his right foot and he was coming inside, back into the 18-yard area. he'd lost his vulnerability. As a defender, then you're thinking, I'm on the back foot. He is in favour of scoring or getting a shot away on goal here. And that was when Brentford, I thought, were great on the counter-attack. And you see it with a lot of sides now, breaking forward, using the pace of the forward players. But as a defender, he got himself in a muddle and he couldn't get himself out of it.
Talking of bad defending, the goal they conceded in stoppage time, Crook, lacked a lot of decisiveness inside that penalty area from Chelsea players. Robert Sanchez, Chelsea's keeper, who saves almost everything except the supporters from heart attacks. Garnacho switches off, doesn't follow his man. I mean, let's be clear, Ouattara's probably offside here. But James miskicks it. The whole thing's really poor, isn't it? I mean, so much has been made about this. Ashley Williams said, you don't practice dealing with long throws. Well, it did look like that, actually. But it's not that it hasn't been the talk of the town. Everyone's been talking about this revival of long ball and set pieces and long throws going into the box. Surely you've got to be prioritising, thinking about how you're going to deal with them.
Yeah, but I don't necessarily think you need to do that in training just to see the game out. I think Chelsea just should have been more switched on as a team. They've worked really hard to get back in the match. Brentford, much the better team in the first half, but those changes that were made a real positive impact for Chelsea. So I think Maresca will be frustrated that his players didn't just do their job properly. Garnacho in particular switched off. Maybe again, that shows that he's not really defensively minded. Having said that, I thought Brentford deserved a share of the spoils, and I've been really impressed with Keith Andrews, having written him off and said that they would be one of the teams to go down. I think actually...
flip flop.
Yeah, I think
Flip-flop.
actually they've been pretty
Is he your
solid.
mate now?
And I think what they have got is goals. I really like Schade. I think Thiago is showing why they signed him at the start of last season. Obviously picked up that horrible injury, and Ouattara will get goals as well. So I think Brentford will be just fine. But I take your point about long throws. Even Bournemouth do that now with Antoine Semenyo. He's turned himself into a long throw specialist. So they're coming back. There's no doubt about that.
I mean, look, they've coming back into fashion a little bit like Crook's clothing. Chelsea have dropped points against Brentford, against Palace. They probably should have dropped points against Fulham. Does that underscore why they won't win the title, Crook?
Well, I thought they were a potential dark horse at the start of the season, but I mentioned when you asked me the question on Thursday's pod, could Brentford cause them problems? I thought they could, based on those performances that you've mentioned. The only complete performance from Chelsea was against West Ham, but how much do you really read into that when you look at West Ham's form before and after? So I think that, yeah, they're a way off for me. They're not on the same level as Arsenal and Liverpool on what we've seen so far this season.
They play Bayern Munich on talkSPORT 2 on Wednesday night. The Bavarians won 5-0 against Hamburg. Kane, Diaz, Gnabry, all on the score sheet this weekend. They lead the Bundesliga with 3-1 wins out of 3, 14 goals scored as well, 2 conceded so far. So it'll be interesting to see how Chelsea get on in Munich on Wednesday night, live on talkSPORT 2. Arsenal 3, Nottingham Forest 0. I was at this game. Arsenal played super well, Mickey. Well choreographed, excellent defensively. Stuart Pearce saying afterwards that he could recognise the champion quality in them this weekend. Can you?
I just think from back to front, I think they've got the right balance. They've signed well. You're always wanting your new centre forward to come into a club and get off to a goal scoring start. Well, Gyökeres has started to do that already, which is obviously a huge bonus. Eze putting in a good performance. Madueke on the right-hand side, because there's always been a worry, hasn't there, when Saka's not fit or he's not in the team. Are Arsenal the same football side, and are they the ones that are going to challenge? They're going to go close this season. And I don't just say that in the Premier League. I also think they're going to go close in the Champions League as well. People maybe look at Liverpool as favourites this time around. You can never write off your Barcelonas, your Real Madrids, Bayern Munich's. But I look at what Arsenal have got, and I don't see many teams beating them. The big concern, if I go back to the Liverpool game, is how brave is Mikel Arteta? Because they didn't show any bravery in trying to break Liverpool down on too many occasions. But I think over the last couple of seasons, I might be wrong in this, but their record against the top 4 or the big 4 is very good. They haven't lost too many games. But I do agree with the bravery side of things. I think when they go to places like Anfield, I think they've got to try and take a few more risks. And if they can do that, then they're not far away from being the finished article, which pains me to say it, because sometimes when I watch Arsenal, I get frustrated. But they are a fantastic team. I think the signings they've made are very good. And albeit, yes, that was a great performance at the weekend, I think there's going to be times this season where they're going to have to dig in deep. And I think you look at your individual players, and they've got the individual players who can dig in deep and win results.
Erdegaard's shoulder injury, once again, that's a bit of a concern for Mikel Arteta. There's so many options, though, that they've got now in attack. And yes, they have had injuries. Saka is training now, won't be back just yet, but he's on the mend. Waneri was excellent. Eze, excellent. Madueke was fantastic in the game. I tell you what, I can't get my head around the fact that Chelsea have sold him to Arsenal. I think it's absolutely calamitous. He's so direct, so unsettling for a defender. I mean, Mickey... I mean, you're a left back. You don't want him running at you, do you? I mean, he is scary as hell, isn't he? I mean, he's so talented.
As a fullback, the worst player you want to play against is a player who's just direct, who gets his head down, and you don't know which way he's going to go. I mean, in my era, I probably knew I was playing against a right-footed right winger most of the time. I know football's changed, but Madueke goes either way. And you're right about the directness, Sam. As a fullback, you want somebody to get close to you. You want to hold them up as much as you can. And as soon as they lay that ball off, it's relief. You're like, wow, I've done my job. It's up to somebody else to go and do their jobs now. But I think his form's been absolutely fantastic for his country and for club as well. Speculation, I know there was a lot of controversy, wasn't there, when he signed for Arsenal? But I just thought he was a wonderful signing. And there's going to be times he might have to play on the left-hand side as well, but he can do it because he's got that pace as well. But his performances have been superb so far.
Yeah, and he silenced the critics, as you say, because there was a few sort of social media bits of backlash when he was rumoured to be becoming an Arsenal player. But they're all singing his name in the Emirates Stadium on Saturday lunchtime. Now, Crook and I have been having a little discussion this morning before we come on air. We're in a Premier League, Fantasy League group. In fact, we're in quite a couple, actually. We've got a draft league and a conventional league, of which I am above him in both.
You still in that?
No, maybe not. But I am above him in both of the fantasy leagues. And the first thing he said to me was, it's too early for rushing to judgment, even though he's rushed to judgment on amorim and Manchester United already. Let's rush to judgment on the striker situation, because we haven't seen Isak yet. We haven't seen the best of Šeško yet. But Victor Gyökeres, who was acquired this summer, and out of the three big new signings that everyone was discussing striker-wise at the beginning of the campaign, he has scored goals. And afterwards, I spoke to Mikel Arteta, and he said, yeah, we're starting to find him a lot better now. I did tip him to be top goal scorer. I don't want to say anything. You know, he's probably not going to beat Haaland, but he might come close there. You never know. Crook's already ready to have a go at me.
I think what's interesting is the point that Mickey made earlier about how ambitious Mikel Arteta is going to be, particularly away from home against the top sides, because he was anonymous at Old Trafford. I thought De Ligt did a really good job on Gyökeres there, and it was the same at Anfield when Konate had him in his pocket and he didn't really get any service. I think this game against Manchester City at home is fascinating. Gyökeres versus Haaland, obviously the battle of the two Scandinavians, and to see if Arteta is going to take the shackles off and try and make a statement, because I know City are coming into it on the back of a brilliant win in the derby. I still think there's every chance that Arsenal could pick up 3 points here, and that would be a notable scalp. So I think, in answer to your Golden Boot question, Gyökeres is going to get a lot of goals. I think they're going to tend to be against the lesser sides, but that's going to be enough to take him close.
It wasn't a Golden Boot question, actually. I said, was he going to be the best performer out of Isak and Šeško? And I think it's you never know. There's a possibility, and he will get goals.
He's got a head start on Isak for the reasons we've said. And I mean, Šeško, yeah, he's going to outscore Šeško because he's going to get more chances.
Angie's back. Crook's delighted about that. And actually, I'm going to be honest with you, I went to see him after the.
It was a loving. You're his best mate. Obviously, it's sickening.
What do you mean? I didn't start it. He started it.
Lovely to see you, Ange.
I think he That's not exactly how it went, but anyway. But I asked him a question saying, are you pleased that you've got more players? You've got a lot big squad now to deal with. Are you pleased about that? And he just looked at me and he went, Sam, you were with me at Tottenham. You know how difficult it was for me there. So, of course, I'm delighted about it. Yeah, it was a good conversation. I thought he was in good form. I
I
think the club
enjoyed it.
suits him a little bit better.
I enjoyed
I
it.
think the club suits him a little bit. I think he's more suited to Forest than he was to Tottenham Hotspur. A lot of pressure, a lot of eyes at Tottenham Hotspur. At Forest, there's pressure, obviously, but I don't know, it feels that it could be a better fit. Arsenal face Athletic Club away on Tuesday night, live on talkSPORT before the City game, that is. So they've got two big tests this week. Athletic Club beaten at home by Alaves at the weekend. Maybe they had one eye on that Arsenal fixture. That after starting with 3 consecutive wins and getting maximum points in La Liga. Okay, we've done so much on the title contenders and the big teams in the top 6. We haven't even mentioned some of the relegation candidates. So let's go through some of the other big stories in the Premier League, including Spurs, Aston Villa, Brighton, and Newcastle United's new 1976 throwback striker who looks like he should be wearing flares. Let's start with West Ham and Spurs. Let's praise Tottenham Hotspur. I think set pieces were brilliant. They were robust. They're ruthless. Bergvall, what a great little player he is, by the way. And you can criticise Daniel Levy as much as you like, but his dream was to find players for very little money at a very young age and then build them up to something special. And I tell you what, this kid is going to be that. I really like him. Van der Ven's a top defender. But come on, West Ham United. Crookie, this group are in massive trouble because that capitulation, the second time it's happened this season, was worrying.
Yeah, and you just wonder now if it was the perfect time to play Forest, getting that victory at the City Ground, which none of us expected, but obviously there was a lot of problems behind the scenes then. Certainly, we thought a corner may have been turned. Clearly, it hasn't, and the pressure is firmly back on Graham Potter because you're right, they're not just losing games at home, they're getting absolutely hammered, and they're getting hammered by teams historically that the West Ham fans loathe. So I fear for Potter. I feared for him before a ball was kicked. I actually thought he might be the first manager in the Premier League to depart. Obviously, Nuno took that accolade, and he needs some results on the board. And all the complaints that West Ham fans have had for a long time came to the surface again. No legs in midfield, no real dynamism in attack apart from Jarrod Bowen, and they can't defend either. And you look at the newly promoted teams, we've touched on Burnley, how well they did for long periods against Liverpool. They're going to be a lot more competitive than they were under Vincent Kompany. Leeds seem to have the ability to grind out results. Unlucky to lose at Fulham at the weekend. Sunderland, I think, are going to be just fine. And if you're looking at teams, so-called established teams who are in trouble, I think Wolves and West Ham are the two most vulnerable for me.
Interesting, isn't it? Because West Ham are not just being beaten, they're being battered when they lose. If you look at their Premier League defeats this season, 3 of them out of the first 4 games have all been by 3 goals or more. 3-0 away at Sunderland. Chelsea beat them 5-1 at home. Spurs have beat them 3-0 at home. That's not a great record, Micky Gray. I know you saw them at Sunderland on the opening day of the season. We talked a lot about what might be wrong with Graham Potter. But there is a need maybe to be a bit patient with him as well. I know I'm pleading patience for everyone this week and saying, I am in a nice mood. I'm in a nice mood. I spent a bit of time with Ange at the weekend. He too is trying to turn around a huge ship that has been sailing in the wrong direction for a long time.
I don't know what manager, if it's not going to be Graham Potter, can walk through the door. I know Nuno Espirito Santo's name's been mentioned over the last couple of days. But how quick can you turn a club around when it's the players who need the confidence, the players who need the form, the players who need to start winning football matches? Everybody said it for years and years and years. You cannot bottle confidence. And without confidence, and a side that maybe expectations are to finish in the top half of the Premier League, I just think it's going to be a real struggle for West Ham because they've not performed this season at all.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And if they do make a change, maybe they will go back to the future. Again, we're talking about revivals and bringing things back from the past. Maybe that is what West Ham will do if they decide to dispense with Graham Potter. Spurs face Villarreal on Tuesday night, fourth in La Liga, beaten for the first time at the weekend by Atletico Madrid. We'll keep you updated on that throughout the course of the week on talkSPORT. A couple of big questions that we need to address. Let's do this quick, fast, and very rapid. Mickey, I'm going to start with you. Unai Emery's team yet to score. Aston Villa involved in a 0-0 draw this weekend. A big game against Brentford on Tuesday night in the Cup. I don't think they can afford to go out of that. And then away to Sunderland at the weekend. What's going on?
I just think he's frustrated. I think the squad itself is probably frustrated because of the PSR rules, not being able to strengthen and bring in better players to take Aston Villa to the next level. Because they were sensational last season. I think even some of the loanees that they brought in, Asensio and Marcus Rashford, certainly made a difference. Ollie Watkins is having problems at the moment in scoring goals. I think he will turn it around and get goals, but I think from back to front, I just don't know if it's the manager who's a little bit frustrated, the players. They'll get it right, Villa. They will be okay, but they're certainly nowhere near the side they were last season.
Crook, Fabian Hertzler, you were at Bournemouth at the weekend when they lost down at the Vitality Stadium, Brighton. His team should have beaten Fulham. His team should have beaten Everton. They did beat Manchester City, then lost down in Dorset. With the axing of the sporting director, David Weir, is there a feeling around Brighton that they won't tolerate another coulda, woulda, shoulda season?
I don't get the impression he's under pressure, if that's what you're asking. But I think that the David Weir departure is an intriguing one. We believe Jason Ato is going to go in, former transfer chief at Arsenal. So obviously they're going in a different direction there. That took us all out of the blue. But I think the issue with Brighton, actually, I was speaking to a couple of local journos before the game. They can't seem to string together 90 minutes at the moment because that Man City win, they were poor in the first half, turned it around in the second. They were really, really bad in the first half at Bournemouth, came back into it in the second half, got the equaliser, but then never really kicked on. I still think they're lacking goals. You know, they haven't really replaced João Pedro. They've invested in a couple of young Greek forwards who clearly aren't yet ready to play in the Premier League. And I think there's an awful lot of pressure on Danny Welbeck. And at the other end, they're making defensive mistakes as well. So if you're asking me which of those two teams has more of a chance of challenging for Europe at this moment in time, I would go for Bournemouth. I've been megally impressed with them. 3 wins out of 4. Unlucky to lose at Anfield, and credit to Andoni Iraola. Basically lost his entire defence from last season, and it doesn't seem to have made a blind bit of difference.
I love it when you use mega and add something on the end of it. You do it every week. It's brilliant. Megally. Okay. A bit like Roy Wegley. Newcastle United got their first win thanks to Nick Voltemada's goal. And they said he's better with his feet, Mickey. What a great header that was.
Oh, absolutely fantastic. Shearer-esque, wasn't it? But the ball into the area for him as well was fantastic. And isn't it strange, isn't it? You play to your strengths. If you've got a tall centre forward, get the ball in the area. I'm just throwing something out there for maybe somebody who plays for Manchester United. But I look at the wide players in the way that Newcastle set up, and the work ethic from Eddie Howe's teams is phenomenal. They've had one off season, I suppose, since he's been in charge at Newcastle, but they're back to the best. His goal was brilliant. It wasn't a fantastic game, but they never really looked under threat in the game, Newcastle.
Yeah. Also, just want to pick you up. A former Sunderland left back saying that Newcastle had an off season, the season where they were dipped out of European football because Manchester United unexpectedly won the FA Cup. And also, it was the season that they beat PSG 4-1 at home in the Champions League. Sounds like a terrible season that for Newcastle United. He does look, though, doesn't he, Voltemada, as if he belongs in 1976. He's a big, tall guy, permed hair, little tash. He is. He looks like Rudy Voller. He is the third German to score in his Premier League debut. Who were the other two? Crook, go for it.
Klinsmann.
Klinsmann's one.
Klinsmann, 1 point, Mickey.
Uwe Rösler.
Go on, what was the other one? No. Any more? Mickey?
Ooh. Was he a striker?
There's people at home screaming at the speaker saying, Ilkay Gundogan. Mickey, he should have gone.
We could have been there all night. He could have been here all night. Klinsmann was an easy one. He did the dive, didn't he, Klinsmann, after scoring in that purple Spurs kit at Sheffield Wednesday?
It did. It was fantastic. What a great moment that was. Wolves' kickoff routine almost led to a goal inside 10 seconds in this game. Now, I actually think that Wolves are better than their points suggest, actually. Their problem is they don't know whether they've got enough goals in them. And there's just a few sort of hot-headed players in there that pick up 1 or 2 yellow cards. I know Victor Pereira sort of got a bit antsy about that, didn't he? But, that's the way. That's the way it goes. Krukmeister, you didn't spend the weekend with me this weekend. I was a little bit disappointed. So, next weekend, can we get back together? Is there any chance Friday, Saturday and Sunday we can spend a bit of time back in each other's company?
I think you got me Friday and Sunday. We're at the Emirates on Sunday, aren't we? I don't know if Perry's going to come with us. That's always an event in itself, if he is there.
Crikey, now hopefully we've only got 2 seats, because he gets a bit too excited, doesn't he, Perry? Right, okay, thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate that. There is quite a interesting takedown of some of the VAR decisions that we've had this week on the Men in Black podcast, which is also available on the feed of Premier League All Access. So stroll through and have a look at that. It's also available on the talkSPORT YouTube channel, as this is, and we'll be back on Thursday to preview all of the action ahead of the weekend, when we look forward to that huge game between Arsenal and Manchester City, and we look ahead to the rest of the weekend's action, including the Merseyside derby, which is live on talkSPORT.